Hey there, sports history fan. Arnie Chapman here from the Sports History Network. Now, before you jump into this episode, I wanted to share with you an exciting giveaway we have going on with Home Field Apparel. We have a digital $50 gift card to homefieldapparel.com for one lucky fan of the Sports History Network. All you got to do is head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways to sign up. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways. This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday's Sports on the Sports History Network. Today we'll have part 2 of the 1974 Miami Dolphins, and we will pick it up Week 10. The winner of a Week 10 showdown with the Buffalo Bills would take sole possession of first place in the AFC Eastern Division. Miami had complete control of the game, leading 21-7 at the end of 3 quarters. But a 42-yard defensive fumble return for a touchdown by Bills linebacker Dave Washington changed the game's momentum. With the score tied 28-28 late in the fourth quarter, Dolphins fullback Don Nottingham rambled 23 yards for a touchdown to give Miami a 35-28 win. Bob Griese completed 11 of 18 passes for 237 yards and connected with Paul Warfield on a 49-yard touchdown strike. Warfield had 4 receptions on the day for 139 yards. The Dolphins were on a roll, winning 5 games in a row. They were first in their division with an 8-2 record. Perhaps they were feeling a little too good about themselves and got overconfident against a mediocre Jets team. The Jets played a game of ball control, running the ball 43 times. John Riggins had 22 carries for 93 yards, and Rich Castor caught 6 passes for 100 yards and scored 2 touchdowns. Miami held the lead in the fourth quarter until Joe Namath connected with Castor for a 45-yard touchdown, giving the Jets a 17-14 upset win. The Dolphins bounced back strong in Week 12 with a 24-3 win over the Bengals. Larry Zonka rushed for 123 yards on 24 carries. The Miami defense held the Bengals to only 8 first downs and 162 total yards. In Week 13, the Dolphins had a 17-3 lead against the Colts and almost blew it, but they hung on for a 17-16 victory. Benny Malone had a big day, rushing for 104 yards on 17 carries. Colts receiver Roger Carr had 4 receptions for 99 yards. In the final game of the regular season, the Dolphins trailed the Patriots 24-0, but stormed back to win 34-27. Having already clinched their division, Coach Don Shula held many of his starters out of this game. Backup quarterback Earl Morrall played well despite throwing 3 interceptions, completing 15 of 23 passes for 288 yards and 2 touchdowns. Backup receiver Melvin Baker had 4 receptions for 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. As usual, the AFC Pro Bowl team was loaded with Miami Dolphins players. In all, 10 players made the team. Bob Griese, Larry Zonka, Paul Warfield, defensive end Bill Stanfill, Safeties, Jake Scott and Dick Anderson. Guards, Larry Little and Bob Kuchenberg. Center, Jim Langer, and tackle, Norm Evans. Jake Scott, Jim Langer, and Larry Little also made All-Pro. The 11-3 Dolphins would play the 12-2 Raiders in Oakland in the playoffs. Miami had destroyed the Raiders in the 1973 AFC Championship, but this was a much better Raiders team. Some were calling this game the real Super Bowl. Nat Moore ran the opening kickoff 89 yards to give the Dolphins an early 7-0 lead, and it looked like the Raiders could have a long day. But Oakland fought back and trailed by only 3 points at halftime. After Oakland took a 14-10 lead in the third quarter, Miami regained the lead 16-14 and increased it to 19-14. The Raiders retook the lead 21-19 before Benny Malone broke several tackles on a spectacular 23-yard run to give the Dolphins a 26-21 lead. Time was running out on the Raiders until Ken Stabler connected with Clarence Davis on an 8-yard touchdown pass that will forever be known as the Sea of Hands. The final score, Oakland 28, Miami 26. Miami had great success running the ball on the Oakland defense, grinding out 213 yards on 41 attempts. Larry Zonka rushed for 114 yards on 24 carries. But the Dolphins' defense was not able to stop the Raiders' passing attack. Kenny Stabler completed 20 of 30 passes for 293 yards and 4 touchdowns. Receiver Fred Biletnikoff had 8 receptions for 122 yards and scored 1 touchdown. Many believe the 1974 Dolphins could have been the first team to win 3 Super Bowls in a row, if not for the distraction of 2 of their future Hall of Fame players signing on with the WFL. While there may be some truth to that, perhaps the Dolphins weren't as good as they had been in 1973, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. The 1973 Miami defense allowed only 150 points scored against them, while the 1974 defense gave up 217 points. Their struggles on defense were evident in the playoff game against Oakland. As a comparison, the Dolphins gave up only 236 total yards to the Raiders in the 1973 AFC Championship game. In the 1974 playoff game, they gave up 411 yards. Although the Dolphins would continue to have winning teams in the years to come, they would not win another AFC title until 1982, and they have not won a Super Bowl since 1973. But from 1971 to 1974, the Miami Dolphins were a force to be reckoned with. That will conclude our podcast for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and God bless.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Hello, football friends. This is Darren Hayes of the Pigskin Dispatch podcast, and I'd like to invite you to the portal of positive football history, Pigskin Dispatch and pigskindispatch.com. We talk about everything that centers around the game of American football, expert discussions, the origins of the games, the great players, teams, and coaches, and more, and some great guests and insights from experts. We have new episodes 3 to 4 times a week, and you can find us on sportshistorynetwork.com, pigskindispatch.com, or your favorite podcast provider.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcasts. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcasts. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.